All right, students, good morning. Let us discuss chapter number 6, life processes. Now, what you must understand here is that there are a few chapters that require a little explanation. Some chapters do not require intense explanation. This is one such chapter, but it is an important chapter. Okay, life processes, chapter number 6. I'll walk you through this chapter carefully, and then I will also provide at the end of the chapter. I'll provide you with a PDF with all the question answers. You can study them also, but for the time being, just keep your textbooks open to chapter number 6 and pay proper attention to what I'm explaining. All right, chapter 6, life processes. The first thing that strikes us is, what are life processes? We hear all kinds of processes, okay, and well, we hear about chemical processes, processes that take place even in the kitchen, chemical reactions and so on. Okay, in our laboratory also, in the chemistry lab also, we carry out lots of processes, lots of reactions. Okay, there are different products also, and during these processes we get different products and byproducts. Some are useful, some are not so useful, some are desired, some are undesirable, and so on. But what is important is life processes are different from those processes. Life processes are those processes that enable the existence of living things, be it plants or animals, even small microscopic organisms such as bacteria and viruses. Life processes are processes which are vital for the existence of all and existence and survival of all living things. Okay. For example, the first one which we can start discussing with is respiration. Respiration is what keeps us alive. Respiration is a process by which we take in oxygen. Oxygen is absolutely vital. Oxygen has to reach every single cell of the body. Without oxygen, the cells begin to die. Okay, and for example, when a man or a person drowns, what is basically happening is water fills his lungs. When water begins to fill up his lungs, there is lack of air. In other words, there is lack of oxygen. The process of respiration stops. Okay, all the cells are deprived of oxygen, and as a result, death occurs. Okay, so when we talk about living things, what do we really mean? All living things have to carry out certain processes for the maintenance of their body structure and for maintenance of life. Without those vitally important functions, it is impossible for a living thing to continue to live. On a day-to-day basis, we require our body to be maintained. For example, if you just rub your hands together, you see some skin cells are going to die and fall off. You don't even realize it. But new skin cells are generated every day. And there are many parts of the body, okay, where cells die and new cells are generated. Of course, in the case of brain, the nerve cells, once they are damaged, new brain cells are never generated. But that's a different thing. For the survival of any organism, it is important that certain vitally important life processes are carried out. Nutrition and respiration are one of them, are just two of these most important processes. But let's see in the beginning. See, how do we tell the difference? Also keep a highlighter or a pencil ready, so you can write down some questions also on the margins of the two sides, or you can also underline them wherever necessary. How do we tell the difference between what is alive and what is not alive? Living and non-living, animate and non-animate. Animate means something which is living. A stone is non-living, it is inanimate. They are living creatures. Okay, bacteria, viruses, plants, animals, all of them are living things, animate, they are alive. But what keeps them alive? And how do we see that, or how do we say, what do we notice? What is our observation about living things? Living things move, for example, but not necessarily. Plants don't move from that. Plants do not hold locomotion. They cannot move from one place to another place. And therefore, movement in itself cannot be a sign of life. Okay, that itself is not enough. There are other things. Movement can be of different types. Locomotion is when an organism moves from one place to another place. But locomotion is not seen in plants, because plants have a fixed existence. They are fixed, rooted to the soil. They cannot move out. But yet they exhibit some kind of movement. For example, plants can bend towards sunlight. The roots grow towards the water in the soil. Okay, the shoot grows towards light, and so on. There are different types of movement, but movement alone is not enough to define life. Okay, so if we see a running dog or a cow chewing cud, or a man shouting loudly on the street, we know that these are living beings. Okay, what if the dog or the cow or the man were asleep? When we are fast asleep, there is hardly any movement, but still we are alive, and different processes are taking place in our body. Okay, the brain is still functioning, although at a much lower rate, it is still functioning. There is blood pressure. Okay, the heart continues to beat, the blood continues to circulate, the food that we have eaten continues to be digested, and of course the kidneys continue to do their function, the intestines continue to do their function even while we are fast asleep. So would we say that we are dead? Okay, we are not dead when we are asleep. The processes have just slowed down, our metabolic rate has slowed down. We would still think that they were alive, but how did we know that? We see them breathing. If you observe carefully, when a person is sleeping, the chest begins to move up and down rhythmically. You see, as they breathe. When you breathe in, air goes into your lung, the chest expands. When you breathe out, the air comes out. Okay, the carbon dioxide comes out from your lungs, and at the same time, your ribs collapse a little bit. Not completely, but just a little bit. That up and down motion of the rib cage, that is a sign that you are breathing and you are alive, even when you are fast asleep. We see them breathing and we know that they are alive. What about plants? How do we know that plants are alive? We see them green, some of us will say, some will say that, oh, they are green, the others have become dried up completely. But even dried up plants are alive. It's just that they have changed color. Sometimes, for example, during the autumn season, leaves are shed by some trees. Some, especially in cold countries, you see, in tropical climates, we don't observe that too much. But in the autumn season, especially in temperate zones, the trees actually shed their leaves during this winter season. So that is also a sign of life. But is it a sign that those they are no longer alive? No. Once again, when spring arrives, new leaves come and we can see this blossoming. You see, flowers may blossom in the spring also. So winter is a time when suddenly things change for the plants, for the trees. But that does not mean that they are very much alive. How do we know they are alive? We see them green, some of us will say, but what about plants that have leaves of colors other than green? For example, a gold mohur plant, okay? Or there are many other plants which have fantastically colored leaves. Okay, you see the Japanese blossoms, okay, they're fantastic, pink colored. So there are lots of leaves and flowers which have absolutely unbelievable beautiful colors. We see them green, but what about plants that have leaves of colors other than green? They grow over time, so we know that they are alive, some will say. In other words, we tend to think of some sort of movement, either growth related or not, as common evidence of being alive. But if you really look at it, see certain animals, plants always grow throughout their life, but animals only grow up to a certain extent. For example, humans, you see, after the age of 24, 25, we stop growing, we reach a plateau, and then gradually we reach a period of stagnation as far as growth is concerned, and then the growth begins to decline. Okay, there is a reversal, and we begin to grow old. Okay, but that is not a sign of death. Okay, that way. In other words, we tend to think of some sort of movement, either growth related or not, as common evidence of being alive. Okay, but a plant that is not visibly growing is still alive. You don't see a banyan tree growing every day. It takes a long time to notice the growth of a banyan tree, because growth is visible but invisible, but it is still there and it is very slow. But a plant that is not visibly growing is still alive, and some animals that can breathe without visible movement. Sometimes you don't see the visible movement of an animal breathing, and you might even be tempted to think that it is dead, but in reality it is alive. So uh, so using visible movement as a defining characteristic of life is not enough. Just because you notice movement, you cannot say that it is alive. Or if you don't notice movement, you cannot say that it is not alive. Movement Movements over very small scales will be invisible to the naked eye. For example, movement of molecules and atoms in the living things. You see, while we are sitting or while we are just sleeping, there is plenty of movement going on, of movement of molecules. Blood is flowing in the organs, blood is flowing through the arteries and veins. So there is some movement which we cannot see. For example, is this invisible molecular movement necessary for life? If we ask this question to professional biologists, they will say yes. In fact, viruses do not show any molecular movement in them until they infect some cell, and that is partly why there is a controversy about whether viruses can be considered alive or not. You see, some biologists, some virologists, people who are experts in viruses, they believe that viruses should be treated as non-living because viruses are basically nothing but strands of DNA. They do not contain anything else. They do not contain other cellular organelles like mitochondria and nucleus and things like that. They don't contain that. They just contain the DNA and a little bit of non-living matrix. So should they be called living or non-living? Viruses can survive for thousands of years in the dormant state, and suddenly when the situation is right, they become active. So when they find a cell, when they infect a cell, enter the cell, they begin to destroy the cell and they become active. Okay, then they become what is alive, what we call alive. But should viruses be considered as dead otherwise? Well, that's a controversy. Why are molecular movements needed for life? We have seen in earlier classes that living organisms are well organized into structures. At the bottom level is the cell. The cells, number of cells, similar cells which are similar in structure and function, organized to form tissues. These tissues again organized to form organs. Organs organized to form organ systems, and that is how number of organ systems combine to form the entire structure of the body. Okay, that is how we have different organs performing different functions, and each organ has got different types of tissues. For example, the tissue of the heart, the cells of the heart are different from the cells of the liver. The cells of the liver are different from the cells of the intestine, and so on. Okay, they have tissues have cells have smaller components in them, and inside each living cell there are different cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus, the nucleolus, mitochondria, okay, and all chromosomes and many other cell organisms, ribosomes, okay, endoplasmic reticulum and so on. They have different functions. They are extremely microscopic. You need the most powerful microscope in order to see inside a living cell. Because of the effects of the environment, this organized order nature of living structures is very likely to keep breaking down over time. You see, we know that even a non-living thing, any suppose you go out and buy say a mobile phone from the market, and then that is brand new, you continue to use it, it is likely to suffer some kind of breakdown. In a year's time you will see that the phone is no longer as new as it was because we have continuously used it. Similarly, if you buy a bicycle or a bike or a car, the tires get worn down after a year or so. After a couple of years, you might even need to replace the tires. So this wear and tear is a continuous process. It goes on. Even living things, the same thing happens. Our body begins to wear and tear. Muscles and cells, bones, everything begins to break down or just degenerate over a period of time. And they have to be constantly repaired. Repairing and maintenance is the process that takes place in our body even while we are asleep. So living creatures must keep repairing and maintaining their structures. Since all these structures are made up of molecules, they must move molecules around all the time. This constant movement of molecules must take place in our body. What are the maintenance processes in living organisms? Now let us find out what are life processes. See, whatever I have underlined or whatever highlighted in yellow, you also do the same thing. If you don't have a highlighter, you can use a pencil, just underline it, okay? And if I have written a question on the margins, you must also write the question in the margin. The maintenance functions of living organisms must go on even when they are not doing anything particular. For example, you are sleeping at night, okay? The process of maintenance of your body goes on even when you are fast asleep. In fact, it does a good job when you are fast asleep. That is the time when most of the processes slow down and the body actually repairs itself at night. And that is why sleep is so important. If you don't get enough sleep, the body cannot repair itself, maintain itself properly. And that's why sleep is essential. Some people say that they can do without sleep for long periods. That's not a good idea. Your body needs the sleep. Okay? When there is wear and tear, that wear and tear has to be repaired and maintained. And for that, sleep is essential. Even when we are just sitting in class, even if we are just fast asleep, this maintenance job has to go on. The processes which together perform this maintenance job are life processes. For example, when you are fast asleep, the kidneys are doing the job. They are filtering the urine, okay? And when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you want to do is go to the bathroom. Why? Because your bladder, urinary bladder, where the urine is stored, the urinary bladder becomes full at night, and in the morning the first thing you want to do is go to the bathroom. The reason the kidneys have done their maintenance job at night. This is essential. Okay. Similarly, the intestines also do the job of excretion. Since these maintenance processes are needed to prevent damage and breakdown, energy is needed for them. Now you see, for example, when you are pedaling a bicycle, your body is providing the energy for moving the bicycle. When you are using a bike, a motorcycle, or a car, or a truck, okay, they move with the help of energy which is liberated from the fuel. Petrol and diesel are sources of fuel. When they are burnt, they liberate energy and motion is possible. So you see, some form of energy must be there. Otherwise, these processes cannot occur. Okay, for movement to take place, for maintenance to take place, for repairing to take place, some form of energy has to be provided. And this form of energy has to be provided from either outside mostly or from inside. Since these maintenance processes are needed to prevent damage and breakdown, energy is needed for them. This energy comes from outside the body of the individual organism. So there must be a process to transfer a source of energy from outside the body of the organism. In other words, there has to be a way by which energy can be obtained from the external environment. Okay. Now you see there is a question which I have put here. Just make sure that you write this question here. You can see this. What are life processes? What is the role of life process? On the margin side, you can actually write down what are life processes, what is the role of life processes. You write the question on the left hand side, okay, so that this is where the answer is. What are life processes? They are processes which are required for maintenance and repair to prevent damage and breakdown to the body. Okay, and what is the role of life processes? They prevent damage to the body and maintain the existence of the body. All right. Now, so there must be a process to transfer source of energy from outside the body of the organism, which we call food, to the inside. A process we commonly call nutrition. So what is nutrition? Nutrition is the process by which food and hence energy from the food that we eat is obtained and the body is able to run, or body is able to maintain itself. If the body size of the organism is to grow, additional raw material will also be needed from outside. For example, when a child is born, it is extremely small. Okay, within the first few weeks, it begins to grow very fast. Within the first month, it has grown very rapidly, almost doubled in size and weight. So for that to take place, the body has to grow. But for the body to grow, it requires energy and other materials from outside. Since life on earth depends on carbon-based molecules, most of these food sources are also carbon-based. On earth, life form is said to be carbon-based life form. We are carbon-based. Even the dinosaurs were carbon-based because carbon plays a vitally important role in all living organisms. We are carbon-based life forms. Since life on earth depends on carbon-based molecules, most of these food sources are also carbon-based. Depending upon the complexity of these carbon sources, different organisms can then use different kinds of nutritional processes. You see, for example, a lion feeds itself in a different way. Plants obtain their food in different way. We humans obtain our food in different ways. A deer, herbivores, okay, plant-eating animals, they obtain their food in different way. So animals, their sources of food and the way they use that sources is always slightly different. Look at this question out here. As I said, what are life processes? Then this question, what is respiration? Okay, we'll come to that question just now. The outside source of energy could be quite varied since the environment is not under the control of individual organisms. These sources of energy therefore need to be broken down or built up in the body and must be finally converted into a uniform source of energy that can be used for various molecular movements needed for maintaining life structures, as well as the kind of molecules the body needs to grow. For example, proteins. Proteins are required for growth of muscles. Okay, so we need to obtain food that contains proteins. Pulses, dal and pulses, animal meat, they contain a lot of protein. Fish, prawns, okay, seafood, they contain a lot of proteins, and these proteins are external sources of proteins are an external source that help our muscles to grow. For this, a series of chemical reactions in the body is also necessary. You see, when you eat something, it goes into your stomach, but after that, certain reactions take place which allow that energy to be absorbed by the body. Oxidation and reduction reactions are some of the most common chemical breakdowns, chemical means to break down molecular substances that we eat. Now in the first chapter, for example, the first chemistry chapter, we learnt about different types of reactions. You learnt about redox reactions, oxidation and reduction taking place simultaneously. Such reactions also take place in the body. For this, many organisms use oxygen sourced from outside the body. The process of acquiring oxygen. Now this is the definition of respiration. The process of acquiring oxygen from outside the body and to use it in the process of breakdown of food sources for cellular needs is what we call respiration. So oxygen is obtained from the environment. Our body cannot make oxygen in the body. We have to obtain it from the external source, that is external environment, that enters our body through the lungs, and when it enters the body, it is used by every single cell to carry out respiration and to obtain energy. All right. Now you can see this question out here I have written. What is, all right, what is nutrition? Now what is nutrition? Nutrition is a process by which living organisms can obtain food from the environment for their daily requirements. In the case of a single cell organism like amoeba, paramecium, okay, single cell organisms, they do not have a complex structure. Their body structure is very simple. Only a single cell is there. Their requirements are less. At the same time, they do not have specific organs for different functions. Human beings, for example, we are complex structures. Okay, we have a number of systems. Each one has got number of organs, and therefore our body structure is extremely complex. But in the case of a single cell organism such as amoeba or paramecium, no specific organs for taking in food. They do not have a specific organ, like we have got a mouth, okay, for taking in food. Exchange of gases, like we got nose for and also lungs. Exchange of gases or removal of waste products may be needed because of the entire surface of the organism is in contact with the environment. For an amoeba or a paramecium, one single cell is in contact with the environment, and therefore all the functions are carried on by that single organism in its single cell. But for us, you see, we have got such complex structures. It is not possible for all the body to be in contact with the environment, and therefore we have to have a separate system. Thus, a simple diffusion will not meet the requirements of all the cells. We have seen previously how in multicellular organisms, various body parts have specialized in the function they perform. We are familiar with the idea of these specialized tissues and with their organization in the body of the organism. It is therefore not surprising that the uptake of food and oxygen will also be the function of specialized tissues. However, this poses a problem. Since the food and oxygen are not taken up at one place in the body of the organism, while all the parts of the body need them. You see, there are trillions of cells in the body. Each single cell requires oxygen. So and all the cells are not in contact with the oxygen. So simple diffusion process is not enough. We have to have some system by which oxygen enters the bloodstream and reaches every single part of the body. This situation creates a need for transportation system like the blood circulatory system for carrying food and oxygen from one place to another in the body. Example is the blood circulation. That's a transportation system. When chemical reactions use the carbon source and the oxygen for energy generation, they create byproducts that are not only useless for the cells of the body but could be even harmful to the body. For example, you see, when we burn petrol and diesel in cars, okay, we are able to move from one place to another place. Energy is released from petrol and diesel. But at the same time, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, byproducts, which are pollutants, are also released into the air. But it has to be released into the air. The car cannot store it inside because it could cause an explosion. Similarly, when our body requires energy, different types of processes use that energy, but byproducts, waste material is also produced as a result of that. That waste material has to be released into the environment or it has to be excreted from the body. These waste byproducts are therefore needed to be removed from the body and discarded outside by a process called excretion. Again, if the basic rules for the body design is in multicellular organisms are followed, a specialized tissue for excretion will be developed, which means that the transportation system will need to be transport waste away from the cells to the excretory tissues. So that is why we need a transportation system and we need an excretory system also, because our body is extremely complex. It is not like an amoeba. Everything is carried out in a single cell, and therefore we need to understand this. What is excretion and why is it necessary? You can see the question out here. The answer to that question is here. What is excretion and why is it necessary? Excretion is the process by which waste materials produced in the body are removed from the body periodically. Why is it necessary? Without excretion, toxic materials, poisonous substances could build up in the body, ultimately killing the body also. That's why it's necessary that excretory system should be there, and it should have this function of removing waste matter from the body. All right, the next part we come to is nutrition. Well, we all understand what nutrition is. Nutrition is a process by which living organisms acquire food from the surroundings, and that food is used or digested in the body to liberate energy for various processes. But the process of nutrition is not the same in all living organisms. For example, the process of nutrition in humans is different from the process of nutrition in plants. Okay, and the process of nutrition in plants is different from the process of nutrition in, say, algae, bacteria, or microscopic organisms, single cell creatures. So different organisms have different modes of nutrition, and we will discuss what nutrition is and how it is different in different organisms. When we walk or ride a bicycle, we are using up energy which is stored in the body. Even when we are not doing any apparent activity, even if you are sitting and talking to me or talking right now or writing something, you are using energy. Energy is needed to maintain a state of order in the body. We also need materials from outside in order to grow, develop. Muscles and bones need to grow and develop, synthesize proteins and other substances needed in the body. This source of energy and materials is the food that we eat. That is why we require food. Of course, how much food we require, but that's a different story. See, some people eat more than what they require, and that's why they grow fat, because the body begins to store that extra energy in the form of fat. If you eat only how much you require, and if you also exercise at the same time, then extra energy is not stored in the body in the form of fat, and you do not suffer from what is called obesity. All right, how do living things get their food? The general requirement for energy and materials is common in all organisms. Every living thing requires energy, whether small amounts or large amounts, but it is fulfilled in different ways. Some organisms use simple food materials obtained from inorganic sources from the environment in the form of carbon dioxide and water. For example, green plants. Green plants use carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight to manufacture their own food. That process is called photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis is the basic process by which life exists on earth. Without photosynthesis, it would not be possible for life to exist on earth. All right, these organisms are called autotrophs. Auto meaning self, trophs means producing, self-producing green plants. Green plants are called autotrophs because they produce their own food by the process of photosynthesis. Right, see this question out here. Okay, what are enzymes? What is the role of enzymes? Now we'll come to that. What are enzymes and what is the role of enzymes? These organisms, they are the autotrophs, include green plants and some bacteria. There are some bacteria which can produce their own food. Other organisms like humans, lions, tigers, and so on, other organisms use complex substances. That is the food that we eat. These complex substances have to be broken down into simpler substances before they can be used for maintaining and growth of a body. To achieve this, organisms use biocatalysts called enzymes. So what are enzymes? Enzymes are biocatalysts, will help in the digestion of food. Thus the heterotrophs. What are heterotrophs? Heterotrophs are organisms that depend upon autotrophs for their own food. They cannot manufacture their own food. They cannot produce their own food. Thus heterotroph survival depends directly or indirectly on autotrophs. Directly, or even a lion, for example. A lion may feed on deer, but the deer feeds on grass. Okay, and the grass is vital for the survival of the deer, and the deer is vital for the survival of the lion. So directly or indirectly, all organisms depend upon autotrophs. And who are the autotrophs? The green plants which carry out photosynthesis. They are the most vital ones. Heterotrophic organisms include all other animals and fungi. All right, now we come to autotrophic nutrition. You see, what is autotrophic nutrition? Autotrophic nutrition is self-mode nutrition, a mode of nutrition in which animals use the surroundings to produce their own food. Green plants. Okay, green plants are the only autotroph. There are some bacteria also. Carbon and energy requirements of the autotrophic organisms are fulfilled by the process of photosynthesis. It is the process by which autotrophs take in substances from outside and convert them into stored forms of energy. This material is taken in the form of carbon dioxide and water, which is converted into carbohydrates. Starch is a carbohydrate. When photosynthesis is carried out in the leaves, starch is produced, and starch is a carbohydrate. And there is a way by which they do this. For example, photosynthesis takes place during the daytime. Why? Because sunlight is required. Okay, and water of course is available even at night, but sunlight is not available at night. So during the daytime, plants carry out photosynthesis. Okay, and that's why it is important that sunlight should be provided to the plants. If plants do not get sunlight, they cannot carry out photosynthesis. This material is taken in the form of carbon dioxide and water, which is converted into carbohydrates such as starch in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Now all green colored plants, they have a substance called chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Chlorophyll small a and chlorophyll small b. In addition to that, there is a third substance called xanthophyll. Okay, these substances carry out the process of photosynthesis. But where is chlorophyll found? Chlorophyll is found in cell organelles called chloroplasts. And where are chloroplasts found? They are found in the leaves of green plants. So in the leaves of green plants, that's why green plants and green leaves are called the kitchen of the plant. The green leaves are called the kitchen of the plant because food is produced in the form of starch in the green leaves. Why in the green leaves? Because in the green leaves, there is a cell organelle called chloroplast. And inside the chloroplast, there is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, which converts sunlight, solar energy, in the presence of carbon dioxide and water into usable form, into chemical form. And that chemical form is nothing but starch, carbohydrate, which serves, and then of course if excess amount of carbohydrates are produced, then it stores it in the form of glycogen. In humans it is stored in the form of glycogen. In plants it is stored in the form of starch, which serves as the internal energy reserve to be used as and when required by the plants. So any excess amount of starch, any excess amount of energy which is produced, chemical energy, it is stored in the form of starch in plants. The same thing happens if we eat too much, then that excess amount of energy gets converted into glycogen or fat and it is stored in the body. A somewhat similar situation is seen in us, in humans, where some of the energy derived from the food we eat is stored in the body in the form of glycogen. And when there is scarcity of food, glycogen is used by the body. All right, let's go further. All right, now this is the equation. This is a very important equation, please. Just make sure you understand this equation, and this equation is the equation of photosynthesis. All right, here, what is photosynthesis? All of you should be writing these questions in the margin, please. Make sure you write it. Underline what is underlined, highlight what is highlighted, and write the question where it is written. For example, here you can see what is photosynthesis. State the reaction taking place during photosynthesis. Now, this is the reaction. Photosynthesis is the process by which green plants manufacture their own food by using sunlight, by using carbon dioxide and water. In the presence of sunlight, they convert sunlight into usable form. What is the reaction, chemical reaction for photosynthesis? Carbon dioxide, CO2, plus water. Carbon dioxide, water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Okay, they convert into glucose, which is a usable form of energy, that is C6H12O6, plus oxygen plus water. Oxygen and water are byproducts of photosynthesis. They are released into the air. That is why, as a result of photosynthesis, the atmosphere actually becomes richer in the form of oxygen, which is released. All right, so this is an important question out here. Let us now see what actually happens. Let us now see what actually happens during the process of photosynthesis. The following events occur during the process. All right, now here you can see a green leaf is shown. Actually, here this diagram is extremely important. Okay, important diagram. Now, what is this important diagram? See, this is the midrib. A leaf is there. If you look at the underside of the leaf, underside, okay, not the top side but the underside. Okay, there are tiny holes in the underside, which if you use a good magnifying glass, you can even see the rough surface. These small holes, they are called stomata. Okay, they are called pores, P-O-R-E-S, just like you have on the surface of your skin, small holes. These pores are called stomata in green plants, and they are all found on the underside of the leaves. Now, the lamina or the leaf blade, okay, the whole portion, The midrib is the central part, and there are tiny on the margins also. You can see some small veins, okay, throughout the leaf. If you take a leaf in your hand, and there are tiny holes called stomata. Through the stomata, water, carbon dioxide can enter and leave. Carbon oxygen can also enter and leave during the small holes. Okay, through the small holes. Let us now see what actually happens during the process of photosynthesis. The following events occur during the process of photosynthesis: absorption of light energy by chlorophyll, conversion of light energy to chemical energy, and the splitting of water molecules. Water molecules is split and hydrogen and oxygen are released. Reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrates, and carbohydrate is generally in the form of glucose and starch, okay, which is food for the plants. Okay, these are the diagram which you must practice once. You can see that chloroplast is there. The small chloroplasts are tiny cell organelles which contain chlorophyll. There is space, air space in between them, and there are guard cells. Waxy cuticle. Cuticle is a protective layer, and upper epidermis is the upper layer of cells. Okay, and the lower epidermis is the lower layer of cells, like our skin cells. Okay, the skin layer is called an epidermis layer. There are 7 layers of skin. You might be surprised to know. And each layer, as you go deeper, okay, as you go deeper, the layer is actually more protective in nature. Alright, these steps need not take place one after the other immediately. For example, a desert plant takes up carbon dioxide at night and prepares an intermediary product which is acted upon by the energy absorbed by the chlorophyll during the daytime, because only during the daytime sunlight is available. Let us see how each of the components of the above reaction are necessary for photosynthesis. If you carefully observe a cross section of a leaf, this diagram out here, 6.1, is the cross section of a leaf. Under a microscope, you will notice that some cells contain green dots. These green dots are nothing but chloroplasts. These green dots are cell organelles called chloroplasts, which contain a green coloring pigment called chlorophyll. Two types of chlorophyll, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Let us do an activity which demonstrates that chlorophyll is essential for photosynthesis. Alright, now I'm going to stop here. We'll proceed from here tomorrow. This is enough for today. Okay. But whatever we have discussed today, you must read it once again. Okay. See the highlighted part. Please make sure you highlight it. Also write the questions which I have written, okay, on the sides. Just make sure that you write the questions there, because it will act as a good reference point. All right. Have a nice day. Thank you.